Hi guys, and welcome to part one of the True Fitness Nutrition webinar. So in this first section of the webinar, we're going to discuss the basic science of weight loss. The first thing that we want to cover when we're discussing weight loss is the very founding principle of the principles of weight management. So there's three different ways that we can affect weight. We can have weight gain, weight stability, and weight loss. Weight gain is typically when we consume more calories than we burn. Stability is when we burn the same amount of calories or energy as we consume. And weight loss comes from where we burn less calories or less energy than we consume. The thing to remember with calories, guys, is it is just a unit of energy. So it doesn't have to think of it too fancy. We want to think of it as just that one unit of energy. And this is the magic number that people don't always know. So you'll see this if you come into the gym. You'll see what we've got on the side. It's a disgusting looking yellow thing. It's a pound, equivalent of a pound of fat. So to lose 1 pound of fat, we have to be in a calorie deficit of around 3,500 calories. Okay. So if we wanted to lose 2 pounds, it's going to take 7,000 calories of calorie deficit to lose those 2 pounds of body fat. Okay, now that doesn't mean weight, that means losing fat. So a lot of the time people will go, oh, I've lost 4 pounds in a week. You're not going to have lost that amount of calories in a week, but you might have lost a pound or two, maybe 2 pounds, and you'll have lost some water weight or some water retention and all those kinds of things. Okay, but this we are talking about actual fat loss. The next thing that we want to discuss is what we call the nutritional hierarchy. Now, this isn't something that you want to get too obsessed with, but this is just the real basics of how things work. So, the most important thing and the thing that dictates fat loss and weight loss is going to be calories, total calories. So, if you're in a calorie deficit, you're going to lose body fat. If you're in a calorie surplus, you're going to gain it. If you're in maintenance, you are going to maintain it. That is all there is to that. Okay. The next most important thing we want to look at after that is macronutrients. So that is carbs, fat, and protein. And protein is really what we would call like the king macronutrient because that's the one that has the most relevance to body composition. We're going to cover that a little bit more in a little bit later. But if you are not consuming enough protein when you're in a calorie deficit, you can lose muscle mass. So that is one of the things that makes this so important. The ratio of of fat and and carbs isn't massively relevant after that. We don't have to worry too much on that. After that, we have nutrients. So things like fiber can be very important for health, for digestion, and for keeping you feeling full. On top of that, we have nutrient timing, so what hours you eat, and we have supplements. Okay, now supplements can be a really easy win, and they can be well worth having. Nutrient timing isn't something you have to worry too much about. You really have to have an elite level nutrition to start worrying about those tiny percentage gains. So we said that protein was the king of all the macronutrients. Now we want to go over a little bit of the reason why this, and there's a couple of reasons for this, but the first reason is the amount of calories in each macronutrient. So 1 gram of protein is the equivalent of 4 calories. 1 gram of carbs is 4 calories, and 1 gram of fat is 9 calories. So obviously, if you were to eat something that was the equivalent of 100 grams of fat, it would be 900 calories, whereas if it was carbs or protein, it would only be 400. So when you're looking to lose weight, it is good to make sure you have enough healthy fats, but you don't want to be over consuming them because you will hit your calorie target very quickly if you're too high. The next thing is something called the thermic effect of food. So this is the amount of calories you burn during digestion. So a lot of people always think of that old, I think it's probably an urban myth, but of celery, how it is so low calorie that you actually burn more calories digesting it than is in the calories celery itself. So if we look at this, if you consume fats, around 0 to 5% of the calories that you consume are actually burnt through digestion. With carbs, it's anything between 5 and 10%, and with protein, it's 20 to 30%. So if you do have a high protein diet, you're actually burning off 20 to 30% of those calories in protein, in the protein that you're consuming. So getting that high protein diet can be a really handy way of getting those extra gains, not to mention all the other benefits that come with protein itself. And then this is another thing that we want to cover is something I call the truth about exercise. Okay, so this is an example of how your body burns calories. So your BMR is what we call your basal metabolic rate, and that's about 70% of your total calorie burn. So that is just the amount of calories you'll burn at standstill. So if you are super hungover or poorly, you're lying on the sofa, you don't move all day, just to regulate body function is what takes up 70% of your calories. The next thing that we have is NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So that is what we generally measure through steps. That's about 15%. You have the thermic effect of food, which we just discussed, is a further 10%. That could probably go up a bit more if it's in a high, or it'll vary depending on how much protein and how many fats and carbs you've got in your diet. And then we have EAT, so your exercise activity thermogenesis. And as you can see, that's typically only about 5% for most people. Okay. So you can't, when you hear people say you can't train your muscle weight out of a bad diet, this is what they're talking about. Okay. So you can train more and burn a little bit more calories, but in reality, it's very minute in compared to what you're going to get from doing 10, 12,000 steps a day, or the benefits you're going to get from having higher protein and a better thermic effect, so better TEF. And this is why we say walking can be the king of fat loss when it comes to exercise. Okay, so improving the amount of calories you burn through NEAT every day can be monumental for improving the amount of calories you burn in total, which will then obviously help you get into that calorie deficit even better. The other thing that's really good with walking is when you try and burn calories through training, you generally have to fuel that with food because it's intense. If you haven't eaten enough, you'll have a crappy session. With exercise, because it's so low intensity, but you can do it for long durations, you typically don't have to fuel it so much, and therefore it's easier to stay in the calorie deficit. Okay, there's a little bit of an explanation here. So it's harder to burn 500 calories than it is to not eat them in the first place. Okay, so nutrition can be much easier. If you think about how easy you could consume a large Twix bar, an extra large Twix bar, personal favorite of mine, to burn that off in the gym would probably take you an hour and a half. It's much better to just not eat the calories in the first place than it is to be chasing yourself to try and do that. Because again, you're going to have to fuel that energy, that exercise, anyways. The average workout burns between 2 and 300 calories, which in terms of weight loss can be beneficial and can help you build things in. But in terms of trying to out eat a diet where you're consuming too many calories and trying to compensate with that through through burning them in the gym, it's a really poor idea to try and do that. Okay, what it can do is top up already a good diet and a good NEAT level. Okay, so it can be great for that, but if NEAT's not right and diet's not right, you're going to be chasing your tail trying to burn it all off. Okay. And then the last thing that we're going to cover in this slide is a really good quote from someone who I did a mentorship under. And he says, nutrition for weight and weights for shape. Okay. So nutrition is the absolute king when it comes to fat loss and losing body fat. But all that will do is make you lighter and look thinner. It won't necessarily make you look better or how you want to look when you look in the mirror. Most of that is going to come from lifting weights and changing the shape of your body and your lean muscle mass. So that's why we always want to try and think of nutrition when it comes to weight loss and weights when it comes to getting into shape that you want to look like. And that's all we're going to cover in this first video, guys. I hope you liked it. If you have any questions, please reach out and let me know, and we'll get them covered. And I'll see you all in part 2. Thanks for listening.